Making headlines for this week of November 18th. Media mutiny. Confidence in mainstream media hits all-time low, and war declared against alternative media after U.S. election. Intended disruption. Protests, expectations, and what is needed from people at this time. Creating obsolete. When fixing a broken system no longer works, and it is time to create a replacement. And youth to power. How some of the younger generation are taking change into their own hands for the benefit of the future.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. We are getting close, everyone. We are approaching, and perhaps now even crossing, that threshold where we are forced to choose to either act in the name of freedom for the future of humanity and the planet, or to fall into utter and complete surrender to the fear and control of the global banking cabal. This period is marked by two arguably significant events that are now unfolding. One is the collapse of the mainstream media, the main tool used by the cabal to brainwash humans into accepting their enslavement, debt, and fears. The other is the apparent war on cash that appears to have broken out. I want to make it clear, however, that these events do not have to be negative. The collapse of the mainstream media is indeed a very positive thing. How the mainstream media reacts to this, however, could turn it into a negative event, especially if people get too emotionally charged up by any rhetoric that the media, its handlers, its controllers, its owners, and the politicians may try to throw out. Abandon the mainstream media as much as possible and let them suffocate on the loss of advertising revenue. The war on cash, which I will briefly mention in financial news, is not something I will give much attention to immediately. Why is this? If this event is meant to be a negative cabal attempt to get people to put all their withdrawn cash back into the system to control people, then I will not give any energy to that. Having said this, however, if this is also an attempt to facilitate changes for the new financial paradigm, then this action may just be a short-term pain as we transition into long-term gain. At this time, I will be honest with you and say that I'm not sure if this developing war on cash is a positive thing or a negative thing. I am merely observing it. We start this week by focusing on the media. In the wake of the U.S. election, as mentioned last week, the mainstream media is arguably in full disaster recovery mode as they attempt anything that may allow them to justify their delusional right to be the so-called truth-tellers of journalism. Are they getting nervous? They must be, because suddenly, in the week of their ultimate humiliation, they, or at least those who control them, have taken on a campaign to discredit alternative news and its sources. First, however, an article by Jennifer Harper appearing on the Washington Times website on November 15th reports that inaccuracies, melodrama, bias, outrage, journalists showcased plenty during election night news coverage, which proved to be intense and endless. The phenomenon has taken a toll. The weary nation appears to be peeved at the press, and that includes Democrats and Republicans alike, who are literally turning away. As America deals with the fallout of the election, 27% of the country is actively trying to avoid the news. It should not have been a surprise, as the hints have been there for ages, and most recently from September. A Gallup poll conducted during the second week of September showed the plummeting trust people have in the mainstream media. An article from truthfeed.com reported on September 15th that a major pollster has some stark news. Americans' trust and confidence in the mass media to report the news fully, accurately, and fairly has dropped to its lowest level in Gallup polling history, with 32% saying they have a great deal or a fair amount of trust in the media. This is down 8 percentage points from last year, writes Art Swift, an analyst for the Gallup poll, which first asked the nation to weigh in on the press in 1972. Over the history of the entire trend, Americans' trust and confidence hit its highest point in 1976 at 72%, in the wake of widely lauded examples of investigative journalism regarding Vietnam and the Watergate scandal, Mr. Swift said. The sentiment has fallen slowly and steadily and has consistently been below a majority level since 2007. The Red State Watcher news website is reporting that an active campaign to take down the mainstream media has begun. According to an article on this website, a new campaign on social media has begun to take down the corrupt national media. Users on Twitter are now spreading the hashtag #BlackoutCNN for a planned November 20th blackout. Not to be intimidated, the establishment media wants to hit back. It is in their monetary interest to preserve their dignity and power while trying to continue the rhetoric that they are the institutions of integrity when it comes to reporting on global events and change. Keep in mind that this is the same establishment media that allowed journalistic icons like Time magazine to announce Adolf Hitler as its Man of the Year in 1938. So you can take a guess as to what this might tell you about the mainstream media. On November 15th, the Activist Post website reported the following. The establishment media is dying. This is not a biased view coming from alternative media. It is a fact borne out by metrics and opinion polls from within the establishment itself. It was true before the recent election and is guaranteed to accelerate after their shameless defense of non-reality, which refused to accept any discontent among the American population with standard politics. Now, with egg on their faces after the botched election coverage and a wobbling uncertainty about how they can maintain multiple threads of a narrative so fundamentally disproven, they appear to be resorting to their nuclear option, a full shutdown of dissent. As well, the article writes, voices within independent media have been chronicling the signposts toward full-on censorship as sites have encountered everything from excessive copyright infringement accusations to demonetization to the open admission by advertising giants that certain images would not be tolerated. However, until now, these efforts have appeared random, haphazard, and rife with retractions and restorations of targeted sites and content. A massive backlash of reader outrage toward these restrictive measures has confirmed that most consumers don't like the idea of being given boundaries to their intellectual freedom. The article notes how corporate media are taking Facebook to task because their algorithms do not filter out hoax news from so-called real news. They are trying to claim that this is why Donald Trump won the election. Ben Gilbert, writing for Business Insider, wrote on November 15th that Facebook is the world's most widely used online service connecting billions of people. It is also responsible for the mass spread of false news and information. Facebook makes it easy for users to share misinformation, false news stories, hyperbolic memes, and outright conspiracy theory. Some of these sites are intended to look like real publications. There are false versions of major outlets like ABC and MSNBC, but share only fake news. Others are straight-up propaganda created by foreign nations, and they list Russia and Macedonia among others. It is accurate to say that there are many false and hoax news sites attempting to share and report information. Some are intentional disinformation by both the global cabal and its agents, and it is possible that some sites are honorably putting out disinformation to help protect people from a mental breakdown as the global cabal is exposed, and reality, as people have known it for their entire lives, goes up in smoke. There are also sites that are attempting to do honorable journalism, even though they may not always be able to be accurate given their limited access to resources. Even this has to be questioned, however, because every human, myself included, has the ability to know intuitively what is and is not for the highest good. Having said this, however, each human is at a level of awakening and discernment that is unique to that individual to serve the growth of that individual human soul in that moment. I do not claim to have perfect discernment, and although I discover some things I share are later shown to be inaccurate, it is my hope that at least my transparency in acknowledging this allows people to accept CVN. For the establishment media, it is an easy cop-out to blame anyone but themselves for an outcome that they did not want and now feel threatened by. A document has been released, presumably by people with loyalties to the mainstream media or its establishment controllers, listing a number of alternative news websites that, according to the more honest establishment media, these sites are either fake, hoax, satire, or otherwise lacking in credibility. The website just mentioned, Activist Post, has proudly claimed to be included on this list. The Free Thought Project website is also on this list. Matt Agorist, reporting for the Free Thought Project in an article reposted on the Mint Press News on November 17th, reported that, make no mistake, a concerted effort by the mainstream corporate media is underway to undermine those who express peaceful dissent. A seemingly blatant attempt to discredit the alternative media by lumping independent publishers into a contrived category of fake news has begun. He continues, this week, multiple mainstream media sources across the web began reporting on a list of fake news sites. New York Mag, LA Times, The Independent, Business Insider, and others all ran with similarly contrived headlines of how this list will help you combat fake news. Now for the kicker, the article continues. Not one of these websites provided a single example of any of the sites on the list reporting anything fake. All they did was promote disinformation, meaning fake news, by claiming, without researching, that all the sites on this list are fake because a college professor put it together. A link to the document listing all the media that this source feels are false or a hoax will appear in the show summary for this story. I will also be posting the transcript as well, as I suspect this is a story that has generated a lot of discussion among awakened souls and their less awakened family members. Maybe there are some thoughts here that may contribute to those discussions. The media has been forced to go through some self-reflection. A few media, arguably to their credit, immediately came out and acknowledged that they had done wrong during the election. Michael Goodwin of the New York Post apologized to Post readers for biased reporting on the election, stating that we blew it. The New York Times issued an apology of sorts with a letter that was posted from the publisher and executive editor. The following comments were shared on MSNBC, where the host points out the responsibility and failure of the media. Granted, the host only says that it was in the last month that the media has been off track, which of course is not accurate at all, but at least he says something.
The Clinton campaign believed until 9 o'clock that they had a lock on this, that they were going to win. The fault of that actually lies with the media. And there's some self-reflection. Jim Rutenberg today writes a fascinating article where the New York Times editor and others basically come to terms with the fact that they stopped being journalists over the past month and began being cheerleaders and began being people who had a conclusion that they reached and then searched for facts to show that Hillary Clinton was a 92, 93, 99.999% chance winner of winning this campaign. Well,
how else would you explain it except that they were searching for those facts? I'm wondering, was it a big aberration or?
No, it wasn't a big aberration. It was there the entire time. They didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to see it. And I will just say it. When people like Mark, us, Nate Silver, even I want you guys to think about this. At the Times and the Washington Post, people I know and love, I want you to think about this, that when anybody even made the suggestion that Donald Trump could be elected president of the United States, it was their journalistic standards that were questioned. When Mark Halperin suggested that there was a pathway forward for Donald Trump as president of the United States, I won't name names because so many of them are my friends, and there's no need to name names now. The time for recrimination is over. But reporters at some of the best newspapers in the world, anchors at some of the best news networks in the world, mocked and ridiculed Mark Halperin. I want you to think about this. They mocked and ridiculed him not for saying that Donald Trump was going to be elected president of the United States. They mocked and ridiculed him for saying there was a slight chance that Donald Trump could be elected president of the United States. Now, if your job, you thought, and Jim Rutenberg did say back in August, the New York Times job and journalist's job now was to defeat Donald Trump. That was the editor of the New York Times confirmed that. If you really think that's your job, think about this. Think about what you did. You were trying to help Hillary Clinton defeat Donald Trump because you thought Donald Trump would be such a malignant cancer on our constitutional republic. But you did two things. The first thing you did is you put liberals and Democrats and independents who thought like you put them in a position where they were complacent, where they really did believe, not only in New York, but across America and the world, that Hillary Clinton had a 98.999% chance of being elected president of the United States. So if that's the case, why do I have to go to the phone banks? Why do I have to knock on doors? Why do I have to go out of my house at 7 o'clock at night and get in my car and drive 2 blocks over and talk to a friend who's wavering and sit down and explain to them why Hillary Clinton would be best for the... I don't need to do that.
Why do I have to vote?
You've told me. She's got a 98.99% chance of winning, or a 90% chance of winning if we're talking about the upshot. Poor Nate Silver got slammed for saying she had a 70% chance of winning. You understand that? That's the first thing you did. The second thing you did, which I think you're beginning to understand now from reading Jim Rutenberg's really good penetrating article, is you completely ignored the world, the elite cluster that you don't know.
Is there perhaps another reason why the alternative media has suddenly found itself in the crosshairs of the establishment media? One hint may come from a recent choice of Donald Trump. An August article from the London Guardian reported that Donald Trump shook free the last vestiges of political supervision on Wednesday with the appointment of a maverick new campaign chief likely to favor his freewheeling style. Steve Bannon, a Breitbart news executive once described by Bloomberg as the most dangerous political operative in America, will wrestle day-to-day control of the campaign from current chair Paul Manafort. Fortune.com reported on November 13th that Trump has now appointed Bannon to his cabinet as a senior counselor. What makes the appointment of Bannon interesting as far as the establishment media war on alternative media is concerned is that Bannon is the former chairman of Breitbart Media. Breitbart Media also just happens to be one of the media on the alleged blacklist. The main Republic Alert email alert website summed it up this way. For the first time in U.S. history, a powerful alternative news platform will have the ear of a president of the United States and serious access to the West Wing. Not only is Bannon a very conscientious truth seeker, following in the footsteps of founder Andrew Breitbart, he is also a no-nonsense political warrior who will not suffer fools gladly. It means that the U.S. of A. is about to be treated to a dose of reality never experienced by the media-consuming public. It also signals Trump's intention to permit the brutal truths to be disseminated by his administration. Many of those truths, by the way, are not only quite inconvenient to the current power structure behind the U.S. federal government, some are downright radioactive that will eventually go nuclear. This could very well be the real reason why the alternative media is being so actively targeted right now. The story will most certainly not end here, and the signs are that the energy of our current times is only going to shake things up even more and not settle them down, at least not yet. From what I've been able to tell so far, Cosmic Vision News does not appear to be on any black list of alternative media. To be honest, I'm not sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing. It would be a good thing because it means CVN either has a format that the establishment is not able to discredit, or the more likely reason is that they feel CVN is not big enough to be worthy of attention. At the moment, CVN no longer enjoys the ratings it once had on Blog Talk Radio, and I have not been able to generate the resources necessary to make CVN bigger. The universe may be protecting CVN at this time until it can break out at a time when it was meant to break out. I keep creating that this is the case. Not being on this list may also be a bad thing because sometimes some bad publicity, especially from corrupted entities, can actually bring attention to a program. In this sense, maybe the establishment is afraid to bring attention to CVN because of its bigger picture and bigger picture perspective, combined with the empowered messages from spiritual and galactic sources. I might like to think that this is the case, but realistically, I admit that this is highly likely. As I have been trying to share with listeners, truth is very relative and very subjective. Therefore, can any website, any writer, or any news program, including my own program, claim to be reporting truth? Any one news source that does not resonate with the truth that an individual is holding in the current moment of now could arguably claim the news source to be fake or a hoax. I sent an email to the anchor of CTV National News in Toronto, Lisa Laflamme, recently and invited her to a discussion about truth, especially when it comes to journalism. This was a number of days ago. Although she has replied to email from me before, she has not yet to reply to this one. And I am not expecting her to because I'm sure she realizes that mainstream journalism and what, rather, mainstream journalism has now become. Any news source that does not have the courage to acknowledge this to its readers, listeners, or viewers is, in my very personal opinion, questionable at best in its transparency and integrity. I dream of a day when I can appear on a mainstream program and discuss what truth is and share what I have just said to the hosts of that program and the audience. In times of universal deceit, telling the truth, or at least exposing information about the enslavement of humanity and the destruction of our planet for profit, power, and greed, becomes a revolutionary act. And this also includes, of course, all the very positive and uplifting news about how these changes are unfolding. Given the sudden flare-up in violence across the U.S., it is pretty clear that something more than just the election of Trump would cause this. Evidence appears to be coming out more and more to support the fact that U.S. billionaire George Soros is the funding source behind the massive and often violent protests against Trump. While Trump has appeared on national media and asked people to stop these kinds of protests, poor people looking for money make an easy target to pay off and ask them to merely protest violently. There is enough anger in enough people that they would surrender to these energies, and this becomes a part of their individual personal spiritual growth and life path as they seek to contribute or not contribute to the awakening at this time. Soros has been known for funding color revolutions in countries around the world to support the U.S. hegemony agenda. Recently, he has been linked to the Clintons, and speculation has been started that perhaps a purple revolution may be underway within the U.S. Soros has even admitted as much as far as contributing to various instabilities in countries around the world. The evidence is now coming out, allegedly showing that violence is being staged in the U.S., which, of course, is nothing new to most listeners. The ProudCons.com website shared a video from CNN of an alleged Trump protester interview, but it was apparently proven later that the protester was a former employee of CNN. A Fox News article from last March reports on Craigslist ads appearing, offering $15 an hour to protest at Trump rallies. ABC News reported on November 11th an alleged protester confessing that he was paid $3,500 to protest at Trump's rally. Sergei Gladish, writing for theduran.com on November 12th, also shares information about Craigslist ads offering money to people to protest at Trump rallies, and that protests are staged. Some sources have reported finding large groups of buses near Trump rallies that have allegedly brought in Trump protesters. A Truth King's article from November 11th reports that Soros probably isn't too thrilled that his horse lost the big race. In fact, according to reports, Soros is serving up a cold dish of backlash across American cities in the way of nasty, violent protests. The billionaire Clinton founder is also a financier for MoveOn.org. After his Hillary horse lost the election to President-elect Trump, a group of cities exploded into violent protests. Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Boston, Washington, D.C., Portland, Oregon, St. Paul, Minnesota, Seattle, and more. Unless you have been living in a cave, you've seen the horrible results of these protests. There have been injuries, damaged property, and traffic shut completely down on freeways. These protesters have cared not one single bit for humanity. According to a statement from Soros's MoveOn.org, Americans to come together in hundreds of peaceful gatherings of solidarity, resistance, and resolve following election results. Hundreds of Americans, dozens of organizations to gather peacefully outside the White House and in cities and towns nationwide to take a continued stand against misogyny, racism, Islamophobia, and xenophobia. However, the protests are much more than just grassroots efforts. They have been coordinated efforts. The tides appear to be turning against Soros. J.C. Collins, on his Philosophy of Metrics website, reported on November 13th how a rogue alliance betrayed the Rothschilds and attempted to hijack the one-world government. He writes, George Soros is running out of friends. With the election of Donald Trump as President of the U.S. and the Brexit vote in the UK, there is a pattern beginning to emerge. This pattern is indicating that a major takedown of George Soros and his Open Society Foundation, among other organizations, sub and individual, are in process. The takedown is in process, rather. The evidence to support such a claim is difficult to collect and present because of the very nature of such an operation. Collins adds that the most obvious is open borders. George Soros and his horde of foundations and organizations have been involved in the funding of ISIS and the subsequent migrant crisis which has spread around the world. It has even been suggested that Soros has been involved in the funding of ISIS recruits within America. The article is lengthy, and he goes into a number of reasons to support his case. For those interested in this subject, the link will be in the show summary. On November 12th, Zero Hedge posted an article reporting that Ron Paul has apparently sent a warning to Donald Trump, allegedly telling him to be aware and wary of the shadow government. Robert Reich, in an August 3rd article from alternate.org, shares that there is a revolt against the ruling class brewing, and the elites don't see it coming. It certainly appears, a short 3 months later, that this was a very accurate assessment, and it has caught numerous elitists very much off guard. Edward Snowden has told people to stop putting so much faith and fear in presidents. This appeared on the Intellectual Takeout website in an article by John Miltmore on November 15th. The best may be saved for last, however. Darren Hardy is today's, or one of today's, preeminent success mentors, having been a central leader in the personal growth and success industry now for more than 20 years. He has led 3 success television networks, producing over 1,000 TV shows with most every known thought leader of our times. He sends a similar message as Snowden. It is up to each of us.
If you know me at all, you know that I don't comment on politics. I leave all that to political experts. But what I can expertly comment on is human behavior and success. And I am very concerned about the mindset, the attitude and behavior that I'm seeing in our culture after this presidential election. Now, I don't want to invalidate anybody's feelings. I'm sure there are many people who are genuinely frustrated, confused, angry, or fearful. But it's time to get over it. What's done is done. You had the weekend and a whole week now to grieve, right? Now it's time to stop whining and get back to work. And stop doing the very thing that caused most of this mess. Stop watching sensational news media, who is making a fortune, by the way, monetizing your attention. Stop reading and responding to the cray-cray stuff on your Facebook newsfeed, and stop talking about it with anyone who will join your pity party. Look, if the results of this election has you worried about your new president-elect, the good news is the president has very little to do with your life. Look back. For all those who thought Obama was going to change the future for them and give them hope about the future, I ask you, has your life changed much the last 8 years? I know people who have failed miserably over the last 8 years. I know people who have succeeded radically over the last 8 years. And I know people whose lives are about the same since 8 years ago. And all of them, Obama had nothing to do with it. And for those who are excited about your new president-elect, I have bad news. No one is going to make your life great again but you. The only way your economy is going to get any better is if you make it better. The only way your health care is going to improve is if you improve it. The only way your future is going to become great, if you make it great. The good news is you are the president of your life, of your family, and of your future. So let me predict what the next 4 years is going to be like. It's going to be about the same as it's been the last 4 years. These are amazing times to be alive. So stop standing on the shore. Stop watching the surf. Stop waiting for the surf to change. Stop whining about the surf. Stop talking about the surf. Just grab your damn board, jump in, because the surf is up.
This is what it comes down to, folks. It is about you and me, and no longer about being saved by any outside force or institution or individual. It is we who have to now co-create the world we are claiming to want. In other geopolitical news, the mainstream media loves to broadcast the message of the European Union that Russia is still the enemy, that sanctions are still necessary, and that NATO needs to be expanded to counter the alleged Russian aggression. The problem with that, however, is that on the level of the general public, people in many countries do not appear to be in agreement with this. Any new listeners to CVN have to know that those people who are currently in charge of affairs around the EU, the head of the European Council, the President of the European Parliament, and the head of the European Central Bank, are all unelected positions. The European Parliament is more or less a ceremonial institution in its powers to give the people of Europe the illusion that there is a parliament acting for the democratic interests of the people around the Union. The European Council is the entity believed to be the main power body of the EU, and none on the Council are elected by the people. The European Central Bank governs all monetary and fiscal policy, which is generally in alignment with the fiat currency fractional reserve system of dysfunctional and criminal banking. Europe is witnessing what appears to be a somewhat quiet revolt, however, and by quiet, I mean that it is not being covered by the mainstream media. It is, however, an increasingly louder voice that is no doubt giving many EU cabal controllers headaches at night. The Brexit vote is merely one of the more recent examples of surprise dissent by the people, and the universe supported the people by giving them a surprise win, despite the media pushing to stay and numerous leaders making appeals to the British public to stay in the Union. Of course, there has been Iceland and Greece. There is also Spain, and I'll mention more on Spain in a few moments in the financial news. While the media tries to say that Ukrainians hate Russians and that Russia is trying to harm Ukraine, the public voting during the Eurovision Song Contest showed a lot of love between the people of Russia and Ukraine, with each country's people supporting the artist from the other country, despite the government claiming that they boycott next year's competition in Russia if Russia won the contest, and despite the Ukrainian artist choosing a song that was meant to be anti-Russian. Ukraine ended up winning, and Russia came third in this year's Eurovision. The will of the people is continuing to make positive waves, even if they are not being fully noticed and shared worldwide through more traditional and failed mainstream media institutions. This week, news comes from two smaller European countries. From Bulgaria this week, which has been described as the poorest of all the EU countries. The country now has a more socialist president in the wake of recent presidential elections there. Euronews has more with this report.
As official results confirm, Rumen Radov will become Bulgaria's next president, while the ruling government has resigned. The former commander of Bulgaria's Air Force, who is a relative newcomer to politics, is supported by the opposition Socialist Party. His election is seen as a boost for Russia, while a letdown to Western allies, as he is considered to be Russia-friendly. I understand this is the beginning of the most important mission in my life, to work for a secure, prosperous Bulgaria, in which there is unity and not hatred from the past. Bulgarian Prime Minister Boyko Borisov has submitted his minority government's resignation to Parliament, after exit polls showed his party was badly losing. Now, I can see, of course, the many mistakes we have made, but we are a party that learns from its mistakes and corrects them. I want to strongly emphasize that I have always been a party of the people, and I can feel for each of them. With these elections, people told us something is not right. They said, your priorities may be good, but there are others. Radov won with about 60% of the vote, compared to about 36% for his opponent. He will take office for a 5-year term, starting January 22nd of next year.
In a Press TV article on November 14th about the Bulgarian election, this article noted the Bulgarian rejection of the pro-Western candidate by reporting that many Bulgarians feel a cultural and historical attachment to Russia, however, and the country is dependent on Moscow for energy. As mentioned moments ago, it does not help that the Western leadership has allowed Bulgaria to be the poorest EU nation, and it is therefore no surprise that the people would lean towards a nation with whom it shares a similar culture and linguistic identity, because the West certainly has not done Bulgaria any favors to help them since they joined the EU. Meanwhile, not too far away, in the smaller country of Moldova, another pro-Moscow president has been elected, and Euronews also has more on this.
Preliminary results in Moldova's second-round presidential election have a pro-Moscow candidate in front. With almost all ballots counted, Igor Dodon has claimed victory, taking 55% of the vote, while his rival has 45%. Dodon has vowed to restore closer ties with Russia. I want to address the other side. Regardless of the result, he said, let's call on people to be calm. We do not need unrest and protests. We do not need destabilization in the country. Dodon's Russia sympathies are in direct conflict with the pro-European stance of the current government. But a corruption scandal in 2014, which threw the country into political turmoil, has left many voters disaffected. Dodon's opponent, who favours European integration, Maya Sandu, has complained of voting irregularities. Unfortunately, this election was badly organised, she said. Polling stations in London, Boulogne, Bucharest and Paris ran out of ballots today. Hundreds of people were unable to vote. Enthusiasm in Moldova for the EU has waned somewhat since the country signed a political and trade agreement. The deal damaged its ties with Moscow, which in turn imposed trade restrictions.
A Press TV article on the Moldova election notes the following. Moldova is located on the fault line separating Russia from Europe. In 2014, some $1 billion, the equivalent of 1/8 of Moldova's economic output, mysteriously disappeared from 3 banks, sparking huge street protests and the arrest of the former Prime Minister Vlad Filat. Is it possible that the money was used to buy access for pro-Western Moldovan elitists who may be arrested when everything is finally exposed? Could the money have been funneled into black budget projects? A pro-Russian candidate winning in a country that is one of the buffer countries between the West and Russia cannot spell great news for NATO and its leadership. As countries awaken to the enslavement that has been committed against them through the criminally fraudulent system of commercial admiralty law via the Western judicial system, many are now beginning to call out the West on their criminal behavior and are actively making statements to no longer consent to this commercial corporate authority. What we are beginning to witness in Africa is not surprising, as many African and Third World nations are aligning behind the emerging market alliance power of countries known as BRICS. Recently, the International Criminal Court, or ICC, has been coming under fire for its apparent bias against African nations. Newsweek magazine reported in an article on October 19th that Burundian President Pierre Nkurunziza took another step towards becoming a global outlier on October 19th. The article added that the controversial leader signed a decree to quit the International Criminal Court following a parliamentary vote to that effect earlier in October. The decree retracted Burundi's participation in the Rome Statute, on which the court's authority is founded. The Burundian presidency announced on Tuesday that it would come into immediate effect, although the Rome Statute states that any decision to withdraw becomes active a year after giving notice to the UN Secretary General. The move makes Burundi the first country ever to pull out of the court, which is based in The Hague and was established in 1998 to deal with high-level crimes, including genocide and crimes against humanity. Of course, if one were to read between the lines, the court deals with fabricated evidence against any leader, in this case African, who may challenge or who do not accept U.S.-Israeli Western hegemony. After that date, 2 other countries followed, South Africa and Gambia, with their own intentions to step away from the ICC. The Global Times news website, based in China, then reported on November 13th that African states form the single largest bloc since 34 of the 122 members of the ICC are from the African continent. The article adds that South Africa is a founding member of the court, and its departure is expected to catalyze the exit of other African countries, such as Kenya, which has long expressed a desire to withdraw from the ICC. That 9 out of 10 situations of atrocities committed against humanity are being investigated in Kenya, Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Mali, Libya, Central African Republic, twice, Côte d'Ivoire, and Uganda, all of them in Africa, has fueled perceptions that the court is anti-Africa. The Kenyan case seemed to be the last straw, where President Uhuru Kenyatta and his Deputy President William Ruto were suspects for crimes committed against Kenyans after a disputed general election in 2007 and 2008. Though the 2 have been acquitted and the Kenyans' case seems to be in limbo until prosecutors can find further evidence, the situation saw the African Union back Kenya's decision to withdraw from the court. The African Union has in recent years been flexing its muscle and appears to openly encourage its members to leave the ICC. There have been calls to have the African Union address the gravest crimes against humanity and to entirely do away with the ICC. The article closes with the following conclusion. As hostilities between the ICC and the African Union continue to simmer, it is becoming increasingly clear that the International Court is losing its grip on the African continent. And it's not only the African continent either. The BRICS Post and the Herald in Zimbabwe have reported on the 16th and 17th of November, respectively, that now Russia has indicated its withdrawal from the court. According to the BRICS Post article, the Russian Foreign Ministry on November 16th said it was withdrawing its signature from the founding document that established the International Criminal Court. Saying that it was acting on orders from Russian President Putin, the ministry accused the court of failing to live up to the hopes associated with it, and that the court did not become truly independent. The Foreign Ministry said that Russia cooperated with the ICC in the hopes that it would become an important factor in consolidating the rule of law and stability in international relations, but this failed to happen. The article hints that one of the reasons Russia has withdrawn its signature support of the court is because of how the court has handled the conflict in Georgia in 2008, and more recently with regard to the Crimean referendum to separate from Ukraine and rejoin Russia. It is becoming blatantly obvious how biased the ICC is against nations that do not support U.S. and Western hegemony. The article does note an interesting turn against the U.S., and this may just be for show, so that the rest of the world does not think the court is biased in favor of the U.S. It might be similar to the CIA making a deal to bust one large drug deal, but let the drug cartel get away with other larger shipments, so that the people think the authorities are successful in fighting drugs. The Zimbabwean article noted a plea by Senegalese politician Sidiki Kaba, the president of the ICC's Assembly of State Parties, and he was asking countries to not leave. The article noted that in his passionate plea, Kaba admitted the ICC was undergoing a difficult moment. This article went on to report also that with Russia and China having blocked UN moves to refer war crimes in Syria to the ICC for investigation, Kaba acknowledged some saw injustice, with international justice marked by two weights or two measures. What is also interesting is a comment made by UN Human Rights Chief Zaid Ra'ad al-Hussein. In the irony that Saudi Arabia is even a part of the Human Rights Council, given its own blatant violations of human rights, al-Hussein issued a warning, stating that a new trend of isolationist and unprincipled leadership was sweeping the world. Now is not the time to abandon the post. This is the time of resolve and strength. Reading between the lines, that same statement might be translated as follows. We are in a period where Western cabal hegemony and control is being threatened, and it is not in alignment with our agenda, and it is moving around the world. Now is not the time to give up on our enslavement and control of humanity and the planet. Now is the time to accept our dictator agenda over you and allow us to create a global control on our terms. Currently, 9 out of the 10 full ICC investigations are in Africa, as mentioned moments ago, and the 10th is in Georgia. In financial news, the global cabal, the banking cabal, is getting increasingly desperate, as many are no doubt observing at this time. With regard to banking, they are attempting to control everything, and that which they cannot control fully, they are trying to limit its influence. Take, for example, cash. An article on the Zero Hedge website on November 16th reported that less than a week after India's surprise move to scrap its highest denomination cash notes, another front on the war on cash has intensified down under in Australia. Yesterday, banking giant UBS proposed that eliminating Australia's $150 bills would be good for the economy and good for the banks. The article continues. Most notably, 2 days ago, Citibank announced that it was going cashless at some of its Australian branches. This is how it works. The government, media, banks, and even academia have formed a single unified chorus to push this idea out to consumers that cashless is good for everyone. And it's happening across the planet, from Australia to India to Europe to North America. They're partially right, according to the article. Going cashless probably will save a lot of money. Paper currency is costly to transport in large quantities due to the need for security. It's also accurate to suggest that going cashless will be good for the banks. As UBS pointed out yesterday, demonetizing Australia's $50 and $100 bills would force anyone holding those notes to deposit them back in the banking system. Bank deposits would rise as a result, and consequently, so would bank profits. Governments would benefit from a cashless society because all savings would be in the banking system, and they have full regulatory control over the banks. This means that your politicians would have more control over your savings and fewer obstacles to impose capital controls or engage in civil asset forfeiture. Even policy wonk academics would have a rare opportunity to take their lousy theories and doctorate dissertations for a test drive. Everyone benefits from a cashless society except for you, finishes the article. It is no surprise that innovative and courageous people are looking for other solutions, therefore. Virtual currencies are one, and local currencies are another. We heard moments ago how the people of Switzerland failed in their attempts to reform their banking system and in getting their constitution to have priority over international law. The saying goes that it is better to not waste time attempting to fix a broken system, but rather to implement a new system that makes the old system obsolete. An article from Sputnik News on November 16th looks to Spain. CVN has reported recently that Spain has now been without a formal and full national government for just under a year now. The country is not collapsing, and in fact is still moving along quite well. The people have actually become quite happy in not having a government, and they have shown the world that it is possible to continue existing without political puppets controlled by a global banking cabal. The Spanish people have also been rebelling against the unelected EU leadership by attempting to have referenda to show its discontent with Western hegemony. The Sputnik News article reported the following. Barcelona is about to join other cities like Girona, Catalonia, and the city of Bristol in the UK and introduce its own social currency. But the move by the Catalan community has infuriated the Bank of Spain, which has told the mayor of Barcelona, Ada Colau, not to press ahead with the new money. The article adds that Mr. Colau has responded and says the currency will be informal, yet for the independent currency to survive, it needs the backing of the city and a formal financial institution. But it works in Girona, where it has apparently benefited many companies that have joined the single currency program. And it works in Bristol, home of the famous anti-establishment street artist Banksy. The adoption of a municipal-style currency has been pretty successful in the Spanish cities of Bilbao, Seville, Toulouse in France, and parts of Bavaria in southeast Germany, as well as in Switzerland. Brixton in South London also has its own Brixton pound, and 50 Lambeth Council employees take some of their wages in the currency also. The Austrian village of Langenegg issues its own Talente currency, where the local mayor, Georg Murchbrugger, lives by the motto, wherever the money rolls, there it has an effect. The introduction of local currencies depends upon the support by the community using it. In the case of so many EU countries and communities, the forced austerity by the unelected EU leadership has polarized the people into action, and they are proving, through their anger and determination, that they can not only make their currency work, but also make it thrive successfully, much to the dismay of any national leadership seeking to maintain its ties to the global banking institution. As more and more countries and communities find themselves being pulled down by the weight of criminally fraudulent debt, created by criminally negligent corporate and governing entities, people will, more and more, begin to create their own solutions that will render obsolete the system of enslavement to which the people have unknowingly consented to, and who no longer choose to be enslaved by it. Perhaps some positive but also unfortunate news coming out of Switzerland this week. Reuters news service reported on November 9th that the Swiss government on the 9th rejected an initiative for sovereign money that would pin sole responsibility for creating money on the Swiss National Bank, as well as a proposed move to give the Constitution priority over international law. The government said the sovereign money proposal to end fractional reserve banking would complicate the Swiss National Bank's monetary policy and put the Swiss economy at risk. Switzerland would become a guinea pig for untested reforms, the government said in a statement, adding such a profound transformation of the monetary system would carry substantial risks and could lead to economic upheaval. The initiative was the idea of a group called Monetary Monetization that says the banking system would become more secure if banks were no longer allowed to create electronic money that makes up most bank accounts. Reading between the lines, what many will take this to mean is that Switzerland still appears to be very much under the direct influence and control of the global banking cabal that is dependent upon fiat currencies and the fractional reserve system of banking, and that this group has not yet been shaken down, at least in Switzerland. Two other initiatives were also voted down relating to restoring constitutional priority over international law and another dealing with the immigration issue. The group that created the movement for monetary reform is called the Sovereign Money Initiative of Switzerland. According to an article appearing on the Alternative News Network website on November 14th, Switzerland is in a key position to play a revolutionary role in changing how global banking functions. In addition to being the world's safest harbor for storing wealth, it is also home to the Bank for International Settlements, the BIS, a shadowy private company owned by many of the world's central banks and acting as a lender to the central banks. The BIS is at the very heart of global reserve banking, the policy that enables banks to lend money that does not actually exist in their bank deposits, but is instead literally created electronically from nothing whenever a bank extends a line of credit. Reserve banking is the policy that guarantees insurmountable debt as the outcome of all financial transactions. The Sovereign Money Initiative in Switzerland aims to curb financial speculation, which is the intended and inevitable result of reserve banking, the tool that makes financial adventurism possible by supplying the banks with endless quantities of fiat money. Limiting a bank's ability to produce money from nothing would be a direct blow to the roots of the banking cartel and would cripple their ability to manipulate the world economy. The Positive Money website reported in an article from June of 2014 the launch of the initiative in Switzerland. The movement is also known as the Wohlgeld Initiative, which translates into sovereign money. At the time when the movement was launched in 2014, the article reported that just over 6 years ago, at the height of the crisis in 2007-2008, the booklet, Creating New Money, by Joseph Huber and James Robertson, was translated into German. At that time, we decided to start a sovereign money movement, the Wohlgeld Initiative in Switzerland. As a citizen of a country with its own currency and the democratic means to implement such a reform, we saw ourselves in the privileged position to take on this essential project. In the following years, we sought contact with Swiss experts, put together an advisory board, founded the organization Monetary Modernization, and began to organize professional conferences to alert the media and the public to the problems of our existing monetary and banking system carefully. The Wohlgeld Initiative, according to the article, is an initiative that not only treats symptoms, but causes. This is explained in detail in other documents. That's why I'm limiting myself to 5 simple questions that are important to me, the article goes on, but have unfortunately been ignored by the media, politicians, and scientists. The 5 primary questions that were identified upon the formation of the group were: 1. Simplicity. Why should money not be easy to understand? 2. Constitutionally, why has the federal government allowed the commercial banks to take the money issuing privilege away from the state and then tolerate them for generating virtually unlimited money supplies? 3. Power. Why do we, people, economies, states, allow ourselves to be dominated unchallenged by the financial markets? 4. Inequality. Why should the money producers in the economy be privileged and subsidized at the expense of all other economic operators? 5. Democracy. Why have these questions never been made public, let alone answered? Do we want an uncontrollable system, or do we want one that we can control democratically? Switzerland was attempting to follow in the footsteps of Iceland, which has had greater success in putting off the global banking cartel than the people of Switzerland have had. All of that led up to the dismissal of the initiative this week. The movement is significant in perhaps several ways. For one, it represents that the people of Switzerland are informed and empowered enough to support initiatives that demand greater government and financial accountability, even if they were not initially successful. It sends a signal that the people are informed and they are empowered to act, and it is important for people around the world to hear this and realize that somewhere around the world others are making their best attempts to bring changes, even if it does not happen the first time. As more and more people learn about the actions of others around the world, while also becoming informed as to what is going on within one's own country, one may begin to realize that it is now time to take action. Congratulations to the Swiss people for trying, and please do not give up on your efforts. While the Wohlgeld initiative was deflected in Switzerland, there are sources still claiming that the Paris Agreement on climate change contains a legal framework, apparently in the small print, for laying the foundation for a new geoeconomic paradigm, including the alleged shift to currencies backed by gold, metals, or resources. The BRICS Post reported the following on November the 4th. At the recent United Nations General Assembly in New York, Secretary General, or the former Secretary General now, Ban Ki-moon, predicted the Paris Climate Agreement would enter into force before 2017, announcing 60 countries had now ratified its terms. Last week, the International Monetary Fund and World Bank welcomed an influx of finance ministers and central bankers to its annual meetings in Washington. At first glance, these two events might appear totally unrelated. The ratification of the Paris Agreement, a global deal to keep global temperature rise below 2 degrees Celsius, is a huge achievement and a real triumph for multilateralism. It also focuses the mind on the next step, how the agreement will be implemented across the world. Here we get our first inkling as to why the finance ministers, central bankers, and regulators packing their suitcases for Washington, D.C. are so relevant to this story. Right now, progress is being made towards mobilizing $100 billion in annual financing flows from rich countries to developing economies by 2020. Practical implementation is also taking place on the ground. There is, perhaps arguably, the more public face of this agreement, and then there is the background face that is not discussed openly. If it helps you to understand this better, think of a celebrity whose husband, wife, or partner sits quietly and supportively in the background and is not as visible as the celebrity is. The public face of the document, according to the article, suggests that overall, the cost of making the transition to a low-carbon future is measured in trillions. This quickly takes us far beyond the realm of public funds, since no government, no matter how rich, can finance climate action through taxation and borrowing alone. One estimate suggests that around US $90 trillion will need to be invested by 2030 in infrastructure, agriculture, and energy systems to accomplish the Paris Agreement. This won't happen without private capital and underlines why aligning the world's financial system with the needs of climate action and sustainable development is every bit as important as emission reduction pathways and removing fossil fuel subsidies. Moreover, set against the US $300 trillion of assets held by banks, the capital markets, and institutional investors, we're faced with a problem of allocation rather than outright scarcity. In our current financial paradigm, this would signal continued and increased movement towards unsustainability in meeting the agreement. However, if it is true that a new framework is being laid underneath the public face, then it would seem that some very quick action on the global financial paradigm is urgently needed at this time. Is it any wonder why the mainstream media is now visibly and publicly losing the respect of its audiences? There is simply far too much contradicting information, and one can believe that this was done mostly by design, so that very few would be able to figure out the agenda that is playing out. The global cabal is desperately attempting to hang on to its global power and control. It appears that they still have at least some, but given the uprisings and the information circulating around the world via the internet, people are beginning to understand that fear is what gives this group its power, and people are choosing less and less to go into fear. The empowered thoughts, prayers, words, and deeds of courageous people continues to inspire others into their own awakening and their own service. Even this week, Germany's Deutsche Welle news website reported on November 10th that Australia has ratified the Paris Agreement, even though U.S. President-elect Trump is threatening to pull the U.S. out of it. Does Trump know something we do not? Or does Trump not know something that we do? He has called out global warming as a hoax, and I personally believe this to be true, as I have explained recently on the newscast on several occasions. Warming is happening, but I do not believe it is because of CO2 in the atmosphere. Yes, there is increased CO2 from burning fossil fuels, but the logging industry and the polluting of the oceans is reducing the planet's ability to deal with it. As well, the geoengineering of our skies, what many know as chemtrails, have also been affecting the condition of our atmosphere and planet. This is something I did not mention in the last few weeks. The chemtrail spraying, I am quite certain, is contributing to the warming also, and this is merely an excuse to demand more taxpayer funds to channel into various projects to help the global cabal retain their control. Each listener, however, will have to ask him or herself this question and seek the truth that is relevant to him or her in this moment. It is still too difficult at this time to know whether or not G20 nations, finance ministers, and central bank governors are still acting on the old paradigm or helping with slowly implementing a new paradigm. The theme of this newscast: we cannot depend on others for the change we are claiming to want. As one photo in the BRICS article shows, a man holding up a sign. Who, if not we? When, if not now? Where, if not here? In general news now, we have been hearing about the alleged small print contained within the Paris Agreement on climate change that is to supposedly help activate the new global financial paradigm. Whether or not this is true still remains to be seen, but until then, as always, it becomes the choices that we are prepared to make individually, as we heard earlier, that creates the kind of world we want. Relating briefly to the previous story about climate change and the Paris Agreement, an article by Ian Johnston of the London Independent on November 11th attempts to paint a fear-mongered vision of Earth's climate for the future, reporting that if leading scientists writing in one of the most respected academic journals are right, planet Earth could be on course for global warming of more than 7 degrees Celsius within a lifetime. And that, according to one of the world's most renowned climatologists, could be game over, particularly given the imminent presence of climate change denier Donald Trump in the White House. May I offer a quick thought on this for you to reflect on and decide how truthful this may feel to you. I am not saying that this is the case, but what if humanity and the planet were evolving to a level of consciousness and a vibration of existence where cold temperatures, along with other criteria of illusion within the duality of life, what if we were evolving to a level of consciousness and a vibration of existence where cold temperatures were no longer necessary to exist on this planet? This is the only reality that we have ever known on this planet in this current lifetime, so it is understandable that people would have difficulty imagining things being anything else. What if Earth was moving towards a more temperate global climate to support a different future for humanity upon this planet? Returning to the story, however, we can't wait for leaders to make the change. We have to make it ourselves, and it seems that at least a few of the younger generations are taking it upon themselves to do just that. An article appearing on the motherboard.com news website has reported that a bright speck of climate news was quickly overshadowed by the presidential election this week. America's children have officially won the right to sue their government over global warming. The article continues, a lawsuit filed by 21 youth plaintiffs was ruled valid by U.S. District Judge Anna Aiken in Eugene, Oregon. A group of citizens whose ages range from 9 to 20 charged President Obama, the fossil fuel industry, and other federal agencies with violating their constitutional rights by declining to take action against climate change. Federal courts too often have been cautious and overly deferential in the arena of environmental law, and the world has suffered for it, wrote Judge Aiken in her ruling. Along with renowned climate scientist James Hansen, who in 1988 pleaded with Congress to consider the harmful effects of greenhouse gas emissions, the youth group was applauded by activists who saw their lawsuit as a much-needed beacon of hope for future generations. In it, the plaintiffs accused the U.S. government and energy trade industries of endangering their rights to life, liberty, property, and to vital public trust resources. In her ruling, Judge Aiken found little truth to the defendants' complaints. She declared the facts of man-made climate change undisputed and supported the plaintiffs' challenge to hold national powers accountable for the damages caused by global warming. Aiken wrote, "This action is of a different order than the typical environmental case. It alleges that defendants' actions and inactions, whether or not they violate any specific statutory duty, have so profoundly damaged our home planet that they threaten the plaintiffs' fundamental constitutional rights to life and liberty." There appears to be momentum behind a youth movement of this nature. The article adds, the youth group's victory is significant not only in itself, but also for the precedent it sets for other federal climate lawsuits. Last year, a judge in the Netherlands ruled in favor of Dutch plaintiffs, ordering the country to lower emissions by 25% of their 1990 levels, and they were to do this within 5 years. This marked the first time a court had decided that states should have independent legal obligations toward their citizens, according to the group's lawyer. The website, ourchildrenstrust.org, proudly announces the victory by the children. According to the website, the mission of this trust organization elevates the voice of youth to secure the legal right to a stable climate and healthy atmosphere for the benefit of all present and future generations. Through our programs, youth participate in advocacy public education, and civic engagement to ensure the viability of all natural systems in accordance with science. Our mission is to protect Earth's atmosphere and natural systems for present and future generations. We lead a game-changing legal campaign seeking systemic, science-based emissions reductions and climate recovery policy at all levels of government. We give young people, those with most at stake in the climate crisis, a voice to favorably impact their futures. The Trust Organization, as part of its guiding principle, advocates on behalf of youth and future generations, and they advocate for legally binding, science-based climate recovery policies. A petition is available on the website for those choosing to sign and support, and donations are also being accepted to help their legal challenge. Links will appear in the show summary for this story with more information. Win or lose, what it represents are people having the courage to stand up and take a chance with the intent of declaring their support for the future of the planet and, by default, the future of humanity also. It is all about finding the courage to exercise one's voice and one's truth, and if one can find many more supporting hearts and voices, empowered with courage, the world could, conceivably, knock out the global cabal and create a healthier, happier, more peaceful and abundant world that much more quickly. In disclosure-related news, we note this week a potentially interesting disclosure scenario that has the potential to unfold before the U.S. presidential inauguration on January 20th. And of course, when I say this, it does mean that you have to use your own discernment. Stephen Bassett, founder of the Paradigm Research Group and the only lobby group registered in Washington to deal with ET issues, believes that the Clintons now have a big choice to make. A press release put out by Bassett on November 17th has stated the following. 2 days after the election defeat of Secretary Hillary Clinton, Paradigm Research Group received a message from a source within the military intelligence community known to the Paradigm Research Group. The paraphrased message was this: persons who are directly involved in the management of the extraterrestrial issues want disclosure to take place under President Obama and are ready to work with the Secretary of Defense if approached. Bassett goes on to note that this contact is notable as it marries up, meaning that it is very similar, with another recent Pentagon action involving the founder of the rock groups Blink-182 and Angels and Airwaves. Sometime during the past 2 years, when articles about the Clinton E.T. Rockefeller Initiative connection were being published worldwide, musician Tom DeLonge, as has been reported on CVN over previous weeks, was engaged by top officials in the Pentagon who wished to assist Mr. DeLonge in bringing ET-related information to the public in the form of books and films. The Pentagon also provided a 10-person advisory panel to help with this project. Many observers challenged the veracity of DeLonge's claims until these claims were essentially confirmed by emails from the files of Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta, released by WikiLeaks leading up to the presidential election. Bassett asks at this point what is going on and proceeds to answer his own question. He states that PRG has publicly stated the agenda of the Clinton team has been to disclose the extraterrestrial presence to the American people and the world, if and when she became president of the United States. That option is now removed. The Clintons now have a choice to make of historic proportions. Should they immediately take interviews with top journalists and discuss in greater detail what they know about the ET issue and what transpired during the Rockefeller Initiative between 1993 and 1996? The resulting media storm will force the Pentagon and the White House to reach the necessary understanding, allowing Barack Obama to be the disclosure president. This rapprochement is necessary because the President and the Secretary of Defense are not briefed by the relevant military intelligence managers on the unacknowledged special access programs, called USAPs, dealing with the extraterrestrial presence. In order for the Secretary of Defense to approach the White House regarding disclosure, he must reach down into the military intelligence complex for the needed information to proceed. Although the managers of the ET issues are constrained by the highest level of classification, PRG is now convinced they are ready to provide that information because there is a growing internal consensus disclosure must take place under President Obama. Bassett observes the sensitivity of time relating to this issue and to the upcoming inauguration, stating that disclosure would need to happen early enough for the nation to absorb such extraordinary information and settle down prior to the inauguration. There would also be time to prepare various government agencies for the engagement of the media and the public going forward. Then the new president would be stepping into a relatively stable and organized post-disclosure status. With this in mind, PRG would assert disclosure after January 6th next year would not be a responsible option. This means the Clintons have a choice to make and a few weeks to reach a decision. Nathaniel Artosilla, writing for morningnewsusa.com on November 14th, picked up on this story and reported that during her campaign, Clinton not only promised to reveal the truth about ETs, but also the secret locations where the government stashed the remains of crashed UFOs. According to London Express, Hillary Clinton had courted the ever-growing alien disclosure community. This was after it was revealed that she and her campaign chief, John Podesta, were keen on revealing the existence of extraterrestrials. Artosilla also notes that a beacon of hope still remains if Clinton and Podesta can convince President Obama to make the big reveal before he leaves office. A statement from the Paradigm Research Group website says there are 70 days left to persuade Secretary Clinton, John Podesta, and President Obama to engage the media on the extraterrestrial issue, leading to a White House-Pentagon rapprochement and disclosure under President Obama. Additionally, many alien truth seekers see President-elect Donald Trump, and they perceive he will be the one to reveal the existence of extraterrestrials to the public. According to them, Trump is not an insider and could spill the beans if he deems it necessary for the public to know of their existence. In a separate posting, Bassett also reaches out to one of the world's most recognizable names when it comes to organizations dealing with disclosure of our galactic families, and this is MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. Bassett is attempting to push MUFON into taking a more proactive action in Washington by informing its members to pass along information to their higher-ups in the hopes of mobilizing greater political action from this network. Bassett writes the following: MUFON is the most recognized organization in the world addressing the ET UFO issues. It has always had the potential to have historical impact. But to do that, MUFON must take the next step. Bassett goes on to explain how MUFON can take advantage of charitable status and act similarly to other large lobby groups, because, under certain conditions, a charity-designated organization can lobby the government. Bassett offers two examples. The AARP is a 501c3 organization. It is 58 years old. MUFON is 47 years old. AARP has 38 million members. Revenues for 2014 were $1.5 billion. One of the chief reasons people join the AARP, it lobbies the government on behalf of senior citizens. The National Rifle Association, the NRA, is also a 501c3 organization. It has 5 million members. Revenues for 2013 were $348 million. One of the chief reasons people joined the NRA? It lobbies the government on behalf of gun owners. With this, Bassett makes his request that MUFON is recognized worldwide regarding an issue of extraordinary importance. If MUFON were to immediately initiate a membership drive that clearly states MUFON is going to lobby the government on behalf of those wanting to know the full truth regarding the ET UFO issues, PRG believes MUFON's membership will increase by tens of thousands within months. MUFON would then have the resources to impact history at the highest level. Therefore, any and all connected with MUFON in the U.S. have the potential to move this group forward into greater political advocacy and service. In the meantime, with the Clinton legacy lying in ruins at the moment, it is conceivably possible that a movement by the Clintons on this particular initiative could help restore any possibility of a Clinton legacy in the history books. What remains to be seen is how separated from the global cabal the Clintons have become and whether or not they are prepared to take a step to share what they know, even if it is only for the egocentric purposes of having their legacy recorded positively in history. Related links will be in the show summary for those wanting to read more. In this current 3D reality of perceiving everything, is it possible that Donald Trump could be a disclosure president, as was hinted in the last article? A commentary posted by Richard Dolan, himself a well-known presenter and researcher on issues relating to ETs and UFOs, on the Stillness in the Storm website on November 11th offers the following. Dolan writes that, I was as surprised as anyone by the victory of Donald Trump over Clinton. Like many other independent analysts, including most recently Julian Assange, I had been certain that the establishment would not allow a Trump presidency to happen. It is important to understand why Trump was demonized. To be sure, his character makes it very easy. There is no shortage of narcissistic, sexist, or otherwise offensive statements in his repertoire from which to draw. But I have never, said Dolan, and will never believe this is why he was demonized. Ultimately, Trump is a disruptor, and his disruption fails, or rather falls, squarely against the two key pillars of the American ruling elite's ideology, neoliberalism and neoconservatism. Dolan adds some information that may also help people to understand the difference between neoliberalism and neoconservatism. He writes that unlike traditional liberalism and conservatism, neoliberalism and neoconservatism are not opposites. Neoliberalism is just another name for transnational globalization, while neoconservatism is nothing other than the U.S.-dominated global empire project. They work together, two inhuman, anti-human processes that ensure a tiny minority of people control and own all the water, minerals, drugs, GM foods, and everything else worth owning in this world. Hillary Clinton, as the ultimate representative of such an agenda, received unwavering support from all segments of that establishment, certainly from the media. Trump, on the other hand, was vilified. More specifically relating to disclosure, Dolan adds that I am not aware of any major statement Donald Trump has made on the UFO subject. I don't know whether or not he takes it seriously, but we need to realize that it's 2016, not 1996. Talking about UFOs is not the kiss of death it once was. Times are changing, and for all I know, Trump just might bring it up. Because Trump is so much more disruptive to the establishment order than Hillary could ever be, I might just think that he would be more likely to entertain the ultimate disruption of UFO disclosure. Dolan seems to disagree with his colleague, or at least colleague in the ET UFO sphere of disclosure, he seems to disagree with Bassett concerning Bassett's view that disclosure could come very soon. Indeed, it is very hard to see and to predict. We are in a period of rapidly fluctuating energies and vibrations, and what seems like an impossibility today may very well become possible tomorrow. Dolan agrees, writing that, having said all that, we live in revolutionary times, technologically, socially, economically, and now politically. Our world is in flux, and in such a situation, things can happen unexpectedly. The Trump victory means that the neo-lib, neo-con establishment is on the back foot for the moment. Dolan feels that it will not stay this way for long. This is hard to call, as I know so many are co-creating something far more significant in terms of global change, healing, and peace for humanity and our planet, and we all are attempting to manifest it as quickly, as safely, as comfortably, and as peacefully as possible for the highest good of all. Over to science-related news now. You have no doubt heard the expression, trust your gut, or follow your instincts or gut feeling, or perhaps follow or listen to your heart. Turns out there may be more truth than previously known to this, or perhaps the truth was always known, but just suppressed more. Those who are more awake and aware at this time will no doubt follow what is being shared here. According to an article appearing on the hubpages.com website from July, it has been reported that amazing new discoveries show that the heart organ is intelligent and that it sometimes can lead the brain in our interpretation of the world around us and in the actions we choose to take. A large number of case studies were enough to prompt some scientists to look differently at the heart and test old theories that the heart is involved in our feelings and emotions. Since cardiac surgeon Christian Barnard's first successful human heart transplant in South Africa in 1967, heart transplant recipients have had intriguing experiences, so strange and out of character that they seek to meet the families of their donors to find out what is going on. Could they have inherited certain behavioral and character traits through cellular memories stuck in the heart of their donors? The article adds that neurologist Dr. Andrew Amour from Montreal in Canada discovered a sophisticated collection of neurons in the heart organized into a small but complex nervous system. The heart's nervous system contains around 40,000 neurons called sensory neurites that communicate with the brain. Dr. Amour called it the little brain in the heart. It has been known for many years that memory is a distributive process. You can't localize memory to a neuron or a group of neurons in the brain. The memory itself is distributed throughout the neural system. So why do we draw a line at the brain? Science tries to explain it this way. The article writes that Dr. Candace Pert, a pharmacologist at Georgetown University, believes that the mind is not just in the brain, but also exists throughout the body. This school of thought could explain such strange transplant experiences. The mind and body communicate with each other through chemicals known as peptides. These peptides are found in the brain as well as in the stomach, in muscles, and in all of our major organs. I believe that memory can be accessed anywhere in the peptide receptor network, says Pert. For instance, a memory associated with food may be linked to the pancreas or liver, and such associations can be transplanted from one person to another. In closing, this article notes that a heart transplant is now a routine operation. The heart has been seen for centuries as a symbolic organ associated with love and emotion. Scientific research today clearly shows that poets and great scholars throughout history have been right all along. The heart has intelligence and plays a particular role in our experience of emotions. A YouTube video that is about 24 minutes long explores this subject in more detail. The following are just a few short excerpts from the video.
Is it possible that a new heart could bring with it the memories of a donor?
This idea of a sentient, remembering, connecting heart is one of the most radical scientific concepts to come along in a very long time, and it changes everything.
Professor Paul Pearsall is a cardioneurologist from the University of Honolulu. He first encountered stories like Claire's whilst recovering in hospital from a bone marrow transplant.
I had a bone marrow transplant for stage 4 cancer in the very early 80s. And I was on the transplant unit, and we would sit down at night, all of us who were dying, and most of us were, and talk about things. And the heart transplant recipients were reporting receiving the memories, feelings, food preferences, fears, musical preferences of their donor. One woman who got the heart of a boxer was the most quiet, demure, easygoing woman, hated violence, left the room when her husband would watch football. She's got this heart of the boxer, now she watches football and yells and swears and punches and everything. So that's when I started hearing all these remarkable stories, and I started to collect every single one I could.
Could the transplanted heart be bringing with it some kind of information from its previous owner? We know that the heart is a hugely energetic organ and is in constant communication with the brain. 40,000 neurons, or nerve cells in the heart, communicate up to the brain. Hormones from the heart travel in our bloodstream, and every time the heart beats, it creates a pulse wave. But most impressive of all is our heart's magnetic energy, 5,000 times more powerful than the brain. It can be measured up to 6 feet away from our bodies.
I thought, this heart is just as powerful, more powerful, and does talk to the brain. Maybe we should be paying attention to that. Maybe the brain, even though it thinks it's us, isn't.
Professor Pearsall was sure that the energy of the heart and its relationship with the brain was the key. And as more and more transplant patients came up with these remarkable experiences, it seemed to confirm it. But could his hunch stand up to science?
The heart is a connective organ, a gentle organ. It's a different type of intelligence. I don't know all about its intelligence. That's what we need to learn. And how we learn that is by asking openly questions about people's hearts, not dismissing them as poetry, that metaphor. Say, maybe there's something to this.
Professor Pearsall collated his research into a book called The Heart's Code. In it, he explored these stories about organ transplant patients and what they reveal about where we store our memories. Simultaneously, on the opposite side of America, Professor of Psychology and Psychiatry from Yale University, Gary Schwartz, was developing a new theory of how memory could work.
I was studying how feedback mechanisms are involved in learning. When we talk, for example, about how the brain learns, we talk about what are called neural networks in the brain. It turns out that the way a neural network works is that the output of the neurons feed back to the input of the neurons. And this process goes over and over again. And so long as the feedback is present, the neurons will learn. If you cut the feedback, there is no learning in the neurons. And the implication is that it's important for the neurons to have the feedback in order for the learning to take place. Well, by extension, any system that has feedback is going to therefore learn. I mean, we learn to shoot baskets, for example, in basketball by getting feedback about whether we're accurate or not. We learn to speak by getting feedback about whether we're accurate or not. And so consequently, any system, any set of cells that has feedback mechanisms in a network is going to learn the same way that neurons learn. And that's what's called feedback memory or systemic memory.
While many may still not wholly accept the more spiritual aspect of life, science is validating a spiritual experience, and it may offer some more hints as to why certain souls participate in experiences in this lifetime, and perhaps then transfer those experiences to affect the life path of another, either positively or possibly even negatively. This will not be surprising for most listeners. Most will either know intuitively or just simply accept as truth that the heart has its own intelligence. As you heard moments ago, the heart is more powerful and does talk to the brain, and it is a connective and gentle intelligence. This would explain why our current world has been created to keep people as much in the mind as possible and not so much within their own heart space. As humans continue to awaken, more and more are listening to and following their hearts while bringing this more connective and gentle energy to humanity and the planet. However, as in the cases of heart transplants, it seems there are going to be learning curves, both for the heart recipient family and the heart donating family. And somewhere along the way, even though some may choose not to acknowledge it, there is some kind of profound spiritual experience that is meant to be shared for a greater understanding of the overall human experience. There is an announcement I'd like to make this week. My life is again going through some major transitions. For most of this year, I've been back in Canada, staying at my mother's place and helping her to prepare her house for sale. The time has come where she felt it did not make sense to continue paying for all the household and property expenses when she was not spending the majority of her time there any longer. When I have come back to Canada, I've had a place where I could stay. Her house has now sold, so I will again be leaving Canada as there is no other place for me to go now. I will be spending 3 to 4 weeks at a health spa in Asia in preparation for what I believe will be a new job after that. If all things go well, I hope to finally have a job with a salary that will allow me to move forward. For years, it has been my hope that CVN would support me, and there has been great support from about 15 or 20 regular contributors to the newscast. To those 15 to 20 people, and they know who they are, please know how grateful I am for what you have been able to share to help me in my service to humanity and the planet. Unfortunately, it has not been enough. So in order to move forward, some changes have to be made. And I do not yet know how this will impact CVN or its future. All I do know is that, at least for now, I choose not to continue being solely dependent upon donations. It simply has not worked. I am not yet at liberty to go into details about what this job will be. This is because it is not yet official and confirmed, and also because I do not have permission from those involved to discuss the nature of the project. All I can share is that the vision that has been discussed with me is in full alignment with the vision I have been working on and trying to share for over 10 years regarding global change, peace, and healing. Assuming all goes well with regard to what is being created, it is expected that numerous planet-changing projects will evolve, and it will allow me to help shape the future in what I am creating will be for the highest good of humanity and also for our planet, and perhaps eventually help facilitate the introduction of our galactic families to the world in a larger way. For this reason, the newscasts may be a bit shorter over the coming weeks. For the time being, it is not necessary to make any donations to CVN. As things come together, I am creating that I will have a salary to support myself. I will be removing the option to donate via the CVN page, and if there is a need to put it back up at some point in the future, then I will cross that bridge if and when I come to it. Again, to those regular supporters, thank you so very much. To those who have contributed randomly, thank you also for your kindness and support. I'm always humbled and grateful that CVN has somehow been worthy enough to receive that support. So, onwards and upwards, and we'll see how things evolve over the coming weeks. In this week's final words, as I just mentioned, here I go again, in transition. Transition is always an exciting time, and I'm looking forward to what comes next. I would just like to give a shout out for a moment to my mother for the courage she has shown in finally making the choice to sell the house that she has called home in the last 25 years or so, maybe a bit longer. It is always frightening when people in their golden years finally realize that a big change is finally necessary. What is especially harder is that she is a part of the last generation of people that never knew technology for most of their lives. Living in a technological world without much knowledge of or passion for technology can be intimidating. My mother admits that she has a hard time understanding the current world. She is a soul that yearns for a simple life, coming from a period in time when people actually talked with one another and actually reached out to help in very concrete ways to those around them. She came from a very poor upbringing, but has always remained positive about the blessings in her life and in her world. In her golden years, her mission is also simple: to enjoy the time that is left and to bring as many smiles to people around her as possible. She is not afraid to act silly, and in a way I have to admire that, because I myself have lost that ability. Now, as I say this, I know full well that I have not really lost it, but simply that I have chosen not to express it, mostly for reasons attached to my ego. Let's be honest. Let's call it what it is. My ego is fearful of what people might say or think if I was to act silly and do things that most would not expect from a middle-aged adult in a professional world such as journalism. People like Jon Stewart can make the news silly and funny. My gift does not quite fit into that category, and I accept that. My mother has shared unselfishly and regularly with those around her, and the same could be said for the wonderful man with whom she is sharing her golden years. They share a common view to life, and it is so very appropriate that they were able to heal from their previous relations and move forward together. Life seems to reward my mother in numerous small ways. She is, however, dealing with one issue relating to her mouth, and it is a condition that has been called burning mouth syndrome. If there are any listeners who have this, or who had it, or know someone who has been treated for it, and how they have been treated, I would love to hear from you. She has had this condition for over 4 years, and I very much want to find a way to help remove this discomfort from her life so her world can be even better. My mother has graciously provided me with a loan so I can leave Canada and go to this health spa that I mentioned moments ago and spend some time cleaning out my body to help prepare it for what I expect will be a very active period of global change. I think I need a major detoxing inside my body, and it is my creation that this will help me regain my energy, my focus, and my sense of purpose moving forward. For the last month and a half, I have been staying with her and her partner Dave at his place, and I'm grateful to him for allowing me to stay this length of time. It is time to leave, so I acknowledge both of them. With my profound appreciation, I say, I love you both, and I thank you for your support of me and for the service I am attempting to share with humanity and the planet. You have both stood behind me and supported me, even in the face of an unconventional lifestyle that not many would choose. It is my prayer that I will be able to help bring health solutions to them so that they may enjoy spending their retirement money on things that give them joy other than health assessments and other not so enjoyable expenses. The world I am envisioning and seeking to empower and create may, just may, be in time to allow some forthcoming health technologies to bring them the comfort they both so much deserve for the kindness and joy that they bring to others on a daily basis. I'm proud of you both for the joy you bring to others. So thank you, and I love you both again. Having said this, and I thank you all for allowing me this moment to express this, I also wanted to share this week that I did something that I have not done in an extremely long time. I went to a movie theater to watch a movie. It has been my hope to view this movie when it was premiered at the Toronto Film Festival in September, but unfortunately the organizers chose not to allow me a media pass to the gala event. Many know that there are elements of truth being mixed in with Hollywood movies, some more than others. A number of Hollywood movies are out there dealing with extraterrestrials or aliens, as Hollywood and so many others prefer to call our galactic families. The movie I saw surprised me a bit, for it wasn't quite what I thought it would be. It is an E.T. disclosure movie, yet, as I am now realizing, is not exactly about E.T. disclosure. It was the movie Arrival, starring Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner, directed by Canadian Denis Villeneuve. When galactic ships appear at 12 locations around the world, elite teams are selected for each location, and in the U.S., a well-known linguist and a scientist are paired up to try to find a way to connect to and communicate with the non-humanoid ET life forms. I have to confess, I think I need to watch it again to grasp what was really trying to be shared in this movie. The movie starts out with scenes from the life of Dr. Louise Banks, played by Adams. She has a child, and the child grows up, but becomes ill and then dies. In present day, she walks into class at a university, and very few are there, and it is announced that ships have begun appearing around the world. Banks finds herself being contacted through the military because of her work in translations of languages. At the beginning of the movie, Banks states the following: "There are days that define your story beyond your life, like the day they arrived." Although the movie focuses on the interaction between Banks and the ETs, as well as the growing global tension about how to deal with the alleged threat, there is something else that seems to be told underneath this storyline, and we don't begin to grasp this, or at least I didn't, until the end of the movie. When E.T. first came out over 34 years ago, the world was given a glimpse of a friendly but not exactly humanoid E.T. in the way most understand this term. Hollywood has given us numerous movies with non-humanoid ETs that are violent and attempting to take over the planet and humanity. What seems to happen in this movie is that the ET visitors appear almost as neutral observers. Even when the U.S. military stupidly attempts to attack the ET ship, the ETs seem to understand that Dr. Banks is on the verge of bridging the communication gap, and they seem to protect her. What is interesting is the ET response to this attack. I do not want to spoil it for anyone, so I'm going to be intentionally vague. The ending, at first, disappointed me. I was left wondering what that was all about, and I really had to sit back and reflect on what was being shared. As I said, I have to go back and watch it again, especially the ending, so I can more fully grasp the message. There was a more human component to this particular movie, and in this sense it was perhaps quite refreshing. There was not a lot of violence, surprisingly little in fact, considering it was a Hollywood movie. The ending somehow brings the life of Dr. Banks full circle, and it manages to bring together past, present, and future into the E.T. human storyline. What is presented is a different form of human ET contact, and it is up to the viewer to follow along in understanding the nature of the communication that Dr. Banks is attempting to discover with the visitors. On a more positive side, without giving too much away, some may be surprised, perhaps pleasantly, about the portrayal of these particular galactic family members, given that they are not humanoid in form, and they communicate in a, shall I say, somewhat unusual form. The November edition of Cineplex magazine, Volume 17, Edition 10, which was available at the movie theater, had an interview with Adams, which I read afterwards. When the reporter stated that the film is not really about aliens, Adams was quoted as saying that people keep telling me it's about aliens, and I say not really. It is about us, about humans. So I like that it's a human at the heart of it, someone who is more pedestrian. She, Adams is referring to her character, is not glamorous. She carries the weight of being human on her shoulders. Bruce Kirkland, writing for the Toronto Sun, described the film as challenging and complex, while also writing that, at its core, Villeneuve says Arrival is not really an alien invasion thriller. Instead, it is an intensely personal drama revolving around Adams' character. His goal, Villeneuve explains, was to explore the idea of our relationship with death, I think in the movie, the main character is trying to find fulfillment, but she finds she needs to be at peace with the idea of death, that death is a part of life. Perhaps one may get a hint of how different this sci-fi movie is from a review by Ticha Dunleavy from the Montreal Gazette. In his review, he writes Villeneuve's own starting point was the inner world of his protagonist. Villeneuve was quoted as saying that, "I was thinking that what might bring freshness and something original to science fiction was if we approached the film from an intimate point of view," he said, following this woman and feeling what she is going through. To that end, he worked closely with cinematographer Bradford Young, and developing an aesthetic that revolved around Adam's character. "We stayed very close to her eyes," Villeneuve said. "There are very few moments where we leave her point of view. Bradford and I really tried to be sensitive to details and moments that you don't usually see in science fiction. That was the most fun part for me, to create these moments that flirted with the dramatic structure off screen, to take the time to embrace what she was going through. I will hold back from saying that this movie is either good or bad. It is not your typical blockbuster, but it is definitely more real. Different people are going to walk away from a movie of this nature with their own respective perceptions, based on the truth that each individual has in that moment they saw the movie. The observant ones will take something meaningful away from both the human perspective and also from the perspective of what disclosure may mean. There appear to be some interesting and relevant hints, for those willing to see them, about the soft disclosure of our galactic family members, whether or not that was intended, that seems to be happening around the world at this time. However, I'll let you take away what you will from it. For most of you, I don't think you'll be disappointed, at least not after reflecting on an unexpected ending. A link to the trailer for the movie will appear in the show summary under the final words. Create a wonderful week until our next moment of now. So that is a sample of the unfolding higher consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is broadcast weekly from the CosmicVisionNews.com website. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary, available on the blog of the website. CVN can be followed through its Facebook page, Minds page, and YouTube channel, as well as on Twitter, Google+, and LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you that life is a school where you learn to remember that which your soul already knows. Until our next moment of now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your hearts, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosure is unfolding all around you. Namaste.